Blessings on us and our bodies and to our sacred space today together. Morgan's going to give her land acknowledgement from Canticle Farm.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you all. These words come from our Canticle Farm liturgy spoken every Sunday morning. You're always welcome if you're here in Oakland, Colony territory. And we won't do this now, but I'll name, when we do this practice, we invite all of those gathered in the circle to name the places in which genocide, enslavement, oppression are ongoing. And so I invite you to just bring to your heart somewhere, some place, some community that you wish to send that gesture of noticing, of care to. We name that we live in a nation created by enslavement and genocide of peoples, the taking and destruction of their lands, and the justification of these acts by the Christian doctrine of discovery, white supremacy, the divine right of kings, and manifest destiny. We acknowledge that some of us continue to benefit from this history, while others of us continue to suffer from its injustices, and some of us experience both. Through grace and humility, we invite healing as we ask forgiveness for what we and our ancestors have done and failed to do. With their help, we commit ourselves to transform rather than transmit the trauma. Thank you.
Amen, Morgan. Thank you so much. Now we'll go into our small groups, small intro groups. And I've acknowledged Drew, who is helping us do all the technology. And it's tremendous relief, I'll just tell you right now. We'll go into our small groups. And in there, for an introduction, I invite you to introduce yourself with your name, where you were born, and the ethnicity that you most identify with. There'll be 4 of you in there, 2 minutes each. My introduction to Morgan. It's going to start with a little bit of my intro, and then we'll go to our conversation. By assimilating into the American story, my 2 ancestral lineages, Catholic Mexican and Irish, in the San Francisco Bay Area, took on white supremacy. Theft of the California indigenous land turned into real estate property that enabled their upper class status and their wealth. The tangible benefits of their financial success is the undergirding of my immediate family's advantages: education, networking, jobs, homes, retirement, stability, and the legacy to my children. So we will talk today with our special guest, Morgan Curtis, about our ancestral histories and wealth and its privileges and responsibilities. And we will touch on the capacity of truth-telling for white settlers and why that is necessary for our own healing as a path to right relationship with spirit love, ourselves, the earth, and each other. So I thank you all for reading and gathering and enjoying the special guests who have agreed to come to us. I have the hope that you might donate to their heartfelt projects. And after Morgan and I talk, we will have another 15-minute small group with a prompt. And then another 15 minutes for your own questions for Morgan, and a closing offered by Morgan. So let's be comfortable in this refuge and deep breath. And I'll start with the simple one. Morgan, how do you know Hillary? Why do you like her book? And why do you honor her work?
Hmm. I didn't know you were going to ask me this, but
Uh,
I was still trying to remember who introduced Hillary and I. I think it was Louise Dunlap, um,
ah, mhm.
author of Inherited Silence, Listening to the Land, Healing Colonizer Mind, elder, mentor, friend here in the Bay Area, said that Hillary and I needed to know each other. And yeah, we initially had a Zoom call, much like this one, and found deep kinship in the work we were doing and what we were trying to contribute to in the world. And subsequently had the chance to dive more deeply together, both in ceremony and organizing and yeah, working with each of our family stories. So yeah, I honor her as a sister, auntie, friend, mentor, cousin, I'm sure, in some way along this path. And
Wonderful.
I'm glad to know her and that this
Yeah.
is in the world.
Thank you, Morgan. Um, so let's talk about stolen land and labor and truth telling. And what does our genealogy have to do with this? Why genealogy seems to be the first step that both Hillary and you and I actually take a look at. And so, why do we seem to start in looking for a better understanding of our place in this world and who we are, and as humans in all this complexity? This ties in so much to what your journey has been from my readings. So I'd love to hear why the truth telling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think many of us might have had an experience in, say, elementary school of go talk to a grandparent or an auntie and write down some of your family history. And beyond that, it's often kind of set aside as like a hobby or a niche interest. And there's a more revered path of studying history, objective, divorced from oneself. And when I was in graduate school, I came to the idea that there were two things that were never really allowed to be talked about in the classroom. One was, why are you studying what you're studying? And two, how do you feel about it emotionally? And what I found is that for so many people to actually turn towards one's history makes history real, to sit with, where am I in this story that I've been taught? Like the people that raised me, that raised them, et cetera, what were they doing at the time of the civil rights movement, of the Civil War? Were they in this country? What choices were they making? To make these histories personal, I think, is a first step to really acknowledging them as real and still with us. And of course, so many of the ways that genealogy is practiced just serves to reinforce like a sanitized version of American history, that from the way the software is programmed to the census is written to each of these tools that are make up what we call genealogy, won't often ask you to deeply confront your history. They can make it all too easy to focus on just names, dates, places, names, dates, places. And so I think we have to talk not just about genealogy, but about a deliberately like anti-racist or reparative or critical genealogy, various names that have given that practice.
Mm-hmm. So, what would you say is an anti-racist genealogy exploration?
I think there's a few elements to it. One of them at the core, I would say, is your intention. What is your purpose in trying to learn your family story?
Ah.
And to be clear on that, to be clear, I'm looking into this so that I know what's mine to take responsibility for in this lifetime. Or I'm looking into this to understand how I came to be the way I am. Or I'm looking into this to make sense of my role in society at this time when so much is unraveling. So to have that just conscious intention, I think is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And then to add context to both research sideways, I say, like if you find your way to, let's say, Ohio, 1840, and you're reading about your great, great, great grandparent, look at that town, look at what were the laws in this state at this time, go sideways out of the particularity of your family into the broader context. And particularly what takes effort is to look at who has written the Indigenous history of this land, who has written the Black experience in this land at this time, and to try and we're so lucky to be alive in a time where so much research has been done, where there's incredible resources like reparationsforslavery.com has the history of institutional racism by state resource where you can and read for each state to do that sideways research. And then maybe a third element of anti-racist genealogy I would mention is the paradox of both turning towards other ways of knowing, of valuing oral history, of valuing intuition and felt sense and mystery, while at the same time questioning family mythologies and the things that have been handed to us that may actually not be true. It's this fine line we have to walk to get beyond just the stories as they've always been told.
So much kind of looking to the stories that have been said. I mean, probably both of us have some privilege in that there are books that we can look into. I can find books about my ancestors, and because I knew very little myself, we didn't really talk about it, although we honored the concept of, and but one of the books I read was This Land Used to Be Mexican Before. Like, what does she mean by that? Yeah. So it was a part of the Mexican Republic. And the import was to talk about the social aspect. What does it mean? So there's different ways of writing history as well. There was always these honorific books about my ancestors. And then this one blew open my eyes and mind about there are social implications of what was happening during that time. And then that's when I started to look more deeply. And let me ask you this. How does it fit in going and visiting the places of our ancestors' lives?
Yeah, I think that gets to some of what I was saying around how do we learn to value other ways of knowing. And I think for me, visiting, whether it's the graves of my ancestors or battle sites for places they were involved in, wars in this country, to home sites, homesteads, each of these visits has always unfolded some deeper level of commitment to the story for me. And yeah, whether it's I remember an interaction with a man in a tire shop where I was saying, my ancestors lived back there. Could I go look down behind that pile of tires to see if I can see anything? And he was like, I don't think there's ever really been a house there. I was like, well, it was 400 years ago, but and yeah, whether it's that interaction with that man or what it was when I reached the place where the creek reached the river behind the tire shop and was able to put down, my gesture my moment of prayer for, like, I'm sorry for how this story unfolded in this place, and I commit myself to seeing a different future forward from here. It's something always changes me each time I make the effort to go somewhere. And it's also been a very powerful way for me to bring other people into the process. Today with the tire shop, older friend of mine, 75-year-old man I had met through organizing, drove me there, and meant that we spent the entire time talking about, why am I researching my colonial ancestors, and what is the responsibility that I'm taking for that? And so, yeah, I think bringing it into place, bringing it into 3 dimensions also invites other people in.
Yeah, I've visited places in Utah where my Irish general ancestor is called the father of mining. And it's a heartbreaker for me to go to where the old mines were that he started, and to visit the sites that have been destroyed, and then to go to the massacre site that is now held by the Northwestern Shoshone and honored as a graveyard for their people. And so the visceral sense. So what occurs to me, what do you think creates the commitment then to come from this journey of the genealogy and learning? How does it get to the commitment? How does it get to a realization that, is it because it's so personal, because it's us and what we're made of?
I think everyone's journey is different in so many ways. And yeah, for me, this work really unfolded initially from a relationship to land, I would say, of like it's been a generative practice for me to look at, like, what do I value that I inherited from my family? And I really do value our relationship to land that was gifted to me by my father in particular. And from that starting place and the way that it led me to the defense of the land and resistance to the fossil fuel industry, to Indigenous leadership, because so many Native communities are on the front lines of fossil fuel impacts, to sitting in circles with fellow organizers where I was being asked, why are you really here? And having to sit with, oh, underneath why I think I'm here, why am I really, really here? Led me back to my ancestors and that responsibility. And yeah, the commitment arose through that very summarized story. And I think each person has to walk their own path and listen for what they're being asked to do by the people around them and the people standing behind them.
And the ancestors talking with you. Yeah, in a way. And the larger context of the ancestors of being the primal elements of air, water, earth, and what is it that they may be calling us from in this relationship that we embody, that we are made of. Yeah. So we're talking about, understanding the kind of background in the history that has been deeply harmful to others, and that realization of empathy and compassion. What do you think about the settler grasping the moral injury that has been perpetrated within our lineage and our relationship with our ancestors? That is a wound, that is a deeply important aspect of realization, it seems, for me, I'll just say that, that if we were to consider atonement, and you're the only other person I've run into who's actually using that word in your work so far. And atonement is, you know, a larger construct, it seems, but the first step is to realize that there is moral injury that has been perpetrated by the harm that was done. And then what I hear is, you know, is there a healing for us from the moral injury that we then now grasp is so deeply harmful, soul corrupting.
Yeah. For folks that aren't familiar, this idea of moral injury initially comes out of like contemporary military contexts and psychotherapists looking at the particular trauma that comes from causing violence.
Mm-hmm.
And as that, I'm going to turn off the beeps. As that idea moved through academia and thinking, it's begun to be applied to these deeper histories of violence, of which myself, as a descendant of settlers in this country, is an inheritor of, as are many of us. And looking at that idea that that wound that is done to oneself through taking life, through ecocide, through the destruction of culture, like what it takes in one's own human spirit to cause that level of harm and destruction. And then we see the symptoms of that pain, of that hurt, whether it's addiction and mental health and domestic violence, and these things in which the pain then plays out again and again towards ourselves and towards one another. And I see that in my family. Each of those things I just listed, different family members come to mind. And I know that that suffering, not only does our whiteness and our wealth not insulate us from it, it is a cause of it. It's those particular legacies that we are not talking about or not grappling with that are continuing to cause those cycles of harm in our family. And I think particularly in a settler colonial context, particularly in the way that whiteness erases ethnicity, culture, language, spirituality, relationship to earth, song, like not only have we carried this moral injury, which of course it's important to name is still ongoing through the ways in which I participate in a violent system still today, even if I can't always see it, even if it's all often mediated by economics and technology, that pain is still being is still growing. That at the same time as that's happening, so many of the tools for healing that our ancestors had have been lost and systematically eradicated. And the confluence of that, to invite each of us to sit with the question of, like, what, for those of us that are white, what have we lost to white supremacy? We can look at the ways we've gained materially that are real, but there are important things to name that we have gained, benefited from. And at the same time, how important it is to name that which we've lost, to find our own stake in undoing it.
Very profound, Morgan. So important to be said. And so the grasping and the grief from the loss is a deeply tangible and visceral part of a realization about what this history is and what is happening in our world today. And from some of my readings, I see that healing is equivocated with truth-telling. Well, first of all, facing it and not denying it. And second of all, speaking up such as you are doing now? And is that called for us? And is that the healing endeavor for us as white settlers?
I imagine many of you are more familiar than I am with the 12-step approach to healing that helps so many people. But one thing that I know about that is the importance of just naming that we have a problem.
Mm.
One cannot get anywhere without first acknowledging we have a problem here.
Wow.
And I think, yeah, there's so many constructs in this American US society that are gaining in strength right now that are trying to obscure that problem, trying to deny the existence of it, trying to make sure that children don't get educated about it, that even just to name these things have happened and we are hurting. All of us, we are hurting. Is this pivotal, shouldn't be radical, absolutely needed act?
Mm. That's profound, Morgan, for us to admit that we are hurting as white settlers, as participants in the colonization and in the violent. And I found that was one of the first things that I resisted, was saying that we were in a violent society, you know, kind of as a blanket statement. And it's just takes some time to see it, I think, and to grasp that that word can be, you know, appropriate for what is ongoing. And of course, we're living in a time where the veil is torn away about what these harms are. And to see it, you know, on our TV screens, if we look every night, the cruelty and the horrors being offered within our culture, within our society, and it does connect. So let's say, what would you want to say about how healing our country and healing our society now could be worked towards?
In so many ways, this is the question that we are all sitting with at this time. Like, what's needed now? And I definitely do not have the answer. But I'm grateful for the people that have been around longer than me that remind me that, yeah, history comes in cycles, and with progress comes backlash. And that, yeah, I think someone quoted for me the other day in the Tao Te Ching, which I will now misquote, but the idea that, yeah, before something goes away, it must get bigger. And to be like, okay, we're in a time where, like, the forces that wish to continue this country from the place that it began, as a place of, yeah, oppression and division and stratification, and like that wish to continue from that place and continue it forward into the future, that there was uprising against that throughout its history, and in particular ways over the last 50 years, over the last 5 years, and that we are in a moment of response to the power that we built. And that doesn't mean that we've lost it all, but it does mean that we, yeah, we are being asked to sit with what is the story that we are telling that invites people into something different than what's happening right now. And yeah, I again go back to, I don't have the answer, and I don't think I should be the one that figures out the answer.
Right.
I'm, yeah, grateful to be listening and trying to navigate it along with the rest of y'all.
And be open and not be prescriptive, because we have no real assurance that our prescription is the one that's going to be correct medicine for what we're doing. But in reading your book on decolonial dames, it looks like Melina Wood Bartholomew. Oh, I thought it was Melina. She is, tell me who she is in your life.
Melissa Wood Bartholomew is the Dean of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Harvard Divinity School.
Hmm.
Yeah. Minister, thinker, yeah, prophet.
Amazing. And I guess I just want to read this. This is what she said in the small book that Morgan produced for her time at Harvard. Quote, truth telling is the only way for our country to heal from the wounds of its violent beginning. It's a decolonizing process. It is the medicine required for creating a world healed of racism and oppression. So hiding and misinformation and lack of education is the opposite of the truth telling, of us being willing to say, and whether we're going to be doing it out in the streets with our signs, saying what we think is the truth. The integrity of standing for that is, I think, what so much of us authentically want to grasp, even when we've come from difficult histories. Let me ask you this. How do you think in the endeavor for reparation and restitution that clearly is a part of your work now in redistributing wealth, how does that fit in, therefore, with what is needed in our world? It's a part of the truth telling, I would imagine, but it is certainly a reparative endeavor. So what can you tell us about that?
Friend and mentor, Dr. David Ragland, he's the director of the National Grassroots Reparations Campaign. He says that reparations is the midpoint of truth and reconciliation.
Oh, wow.
And I appreciate that because, yeah, call it reconciliation, call it coming together, call it coexistence, call it peace, call it collaboration, like this thing that we need to figure out how to do together in this country called being together and living and creating a society in which people can live. We can't get there without reparations, is what I've been taught and invited to see, because yeah, the wounds from the past are so big and so present that our coming together, yeah, requires medicine, requires attention. And yeah, reparations aren't punishment. Reparations are a gesture of love. They're a gesture of like, I see you, and like, I value your humanity, and I'm sorry, and I want to go forward together from here. I don't want us to like, yeah, fight over the remaining resources on a dying planet. I want us to figure out how to share. And yeah, to look forward in that way requires looking backward in the way that reparations asks us to. Yeah, and folks have said to me, it's surely a strange time to be talking about reparations. Like, we could not be further on a national scale from winning reparations, it feels right now. And I'm so grateful that both in my own work, my own path has brought me into relationship and proximity with people that aren't waiting for the federal government to enact reparations, that there are reparative acts on all scales that are possible here and now, policy aside, whether it's the moving of money, the fighting for education and curriculum, the renaming of places, the the retelling of history in our local museums. There's thousands of reparative actions that can be taken even in the most regressive of political climates. I think in many ways the most powerful of them are not even visible to us. They're not talked about in the media. Their stories aren't told. They're happening, in subversive, quiet relationship between folks of different histories who are like daring to come together and support each other, to be in mutual aid relationships in a time when that's needed so much. So it's important to not conflate those grassroots reparative acts with like reparations as defined by the UN, which needs to happen on structural, institutional, governmental levels. And we can value those reparative acts which lead us forward when so much is in the way.
It's deeply inspiring, Morgan, to hear the clarity of what could be the context of a healed world, a healing world, and to clearly state that looking at the wounds, understanding what those wounds are, and being able to act in what generally I call right relationship. You know, that however that right, put our hearts right. That's what I think your mentor said in Harvard. Put our hearts right so that we can be in right relationship with our world, with our histories, with our future generations, and keep to that, hold to that. And that can be defined as subversive and beautiful and deeply and profoundly necessary for our world today. So we do this together, and we love and care for each other in this work together. Thank you. So I invite your questions for Morgan or comments that may have arisen for you from our interview or from your small groups. And those who would like to speak can indicate by clicking that raise hand icon from the either the React or from the, I don't know, I have mine in my nav bar. It could be under more, under 3 dots, but we have to use that because there's enough of us. And I invite you to take no longer than a minute in your comment or question, and then click lower hand afterwards. Dora, I see you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you, Morgan. And I was curious if you have had what kind of discussions you have with your own family about all your explorations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a huge part of the journey, as you can imagine. Often the kind of central character in my journey with this is my dad. He's the one that I've had the most tension or disagreement or back and forth with. At one point, my dad said to me, Morgan, you keep talking about the white supremacist capitalist heteropatriarchy, and yes, I'm white, and yes, I'm a capitalist, and yes, I'm hetero, and I'm your effing father. And I realized that I needed to change my approach because it was an attack on him, was all he could hear. And we've been on a huge journey since then. And I think ultimately we will maybe never see eye to eye on our political economic beliefs, but that there's been some powerful reconnection and collaboration. And I would say that some of the most meaningful relationships for me in this work have also been with unexpected family members. I've become so much closer to my great aunts, the sisters of my late grandfather, through my interest in their stories and their memories. And one of them has become a really tremendous ally for me in trying to recover some family papers that my uncle is hoarding and trying to keep away from the rest of us. And then a set of my father's first cousins have really come on an amazing journey with me and been moving money to some of the same communities that my reparative work has invited me to. And that's been particularly meaningful because my father's cousins have part of the same trust fund that he does. So it feels like the ancestors are kind of like flowing down, getting to my dad, being like, oh, can't go this way, down through the cousins and out into the world, which, yeah, I'm grateful that the money is finding its way out of our family and back to where it needs to go.
Beautiful. Colleen, you want to unmute?
Yeah. Morgan, earlier in your talk, you talked about Indigenous histories linked that told different histories of different tribes or different regions. I wondered if you could share that in the chat.
Yeah, I think the research I mentioned is broader than just Native history. It's from a website called reparationsforslavery.com. And
Okay.
they have a resource where it's institutional racism, history of institutional racism by state. And it's very
Oh,
comprehensive.
And I'll put it in the newsletter afterwards.
thank
Yeah.
you, Molly. That's great.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Lauren,
Oh my gosh, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. And Molly, thank you for organizing us.
you're welcome.
It's been a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate your thought leadership, and I've just learned so much. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being
Always accept gratitude. It's a good thing. Good way to start and end. Lucas.
Morgan, I'm curious about different contexts in which you've gathered people to be in these particular conversations, and what ingredients towards hosting that or supporting that have you found useful?
Yeah. Yeah, I came up through the youth climate justice movement, where I started to be someone that was talking more openly about class privilege than people usually do, which meant that people often were coming up to me and saying things like, I secretly have a trust fund and I've never told anybody. And that process invited me to see, oh, there's a piece here that's my role around how do I be with my people. And I would say the initial demographic was activist with secret trust fund. Oh, I love them. And has broadened from there. But I, found myself holding a space over the last 5 years with my dear friend and collaborator, Justine Epstein, that's called the Ancestors and Money cohort. We have some alums here in the room. Grateful for y'all. And that space is specifically for folks who are navigating as white, wealthy people, histories of colonization and enslavement, and doing that from a place of, rootedness in spirit and community, and wanting to do the work at the depth that it requires us. And Justine and I started offering that space because we needed it in so many ways, and we're so moved by, we've done, I think, now 7 different versions of that cohort with folks from all over the country, and it's grounded in many different teachings, but one really supportive framework has been the work that reconnects from Joanna Macy as a way of being with grief and despair and making space for our rage and our emotions and like what needs to move in this ancestral work. And then I also feel deeply shaped by the teachings of restorative justice and being that, a person is not the worst thing they ever did, and that humanity is recoverable, and that we can, that healing even from the most grievous harms is what we're heading towards. And these cohort spaces are 6 to 9 months plus, and I think we need generations to do this work, but that's kind of been the smallest amount of time I've gathered people in to be in these conversations, because it requires building some trust to get vulnerable with each other.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Give us a larger context about where and what. And Karen, we have about 1 minute, so I think you can do it.
I'll give it 1 minute to the word atonement. You said that Morgan is one of the few people that is actually using it, and I just want to go back to the atonement aspect of it, and also to illuminate the fact that we colonial settler folk tend to think about things as the past, when in reality, what I wrote down is it's moral injury that continues to be perpetrated from the harm that was done. And if we do not actively shift, that harm continues to be done. So it's all about here, now, and coming back to one-ment.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Karen.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. And I'll just name, I was so moved a few months ago working with someone one-on-one on their process of wealth redistribution. And she said, I know that the reason I'm chronically ill is because of these investments in extractive industry being what's funding my life. And for us to look at, like, for those of us with wealth conventionally invested in this country, like, untold suffering is being caused in our names that's fueling our lives. And what does that do to us? These histories are not over. They're merely continuing in new forms and can be obscured to us by these systems. So thank you for naming that.
That makes it so clear, Morgan, and your heart and your motherhood and your offering to us and guidance as a young person is so important. And I vow to you for that. Thank you, my sweet. And I'm looking forward to your closing, because we have just 3 minutes if you want to do that now. Thank you, Morgan.
Yeah. Thank you, Molly, for this invitation. I'm grateful for how we got to deepen, you and I, through this process. And thank you everyone for witnessing it. And as we close our time together, just inviting each of us in our bodies, in our humanity, to remember who we are, to remember why we're here, to remember those that came before and their love and their lives and their work that made our lives possible, and their choices constrained, difficult, maybe violent, but also brought us here. And as we do that remembering work, may the strength that is most deeply rooted behind us be with us. The strength that comes from the earth, the strength that comes from our inseparability from the living earth, the community of ancestors, the future ones that are calling us forward. May we find the strength that we need to take just the next step, the only one we can take, however small. There is one thing that we will do today, tomorrow, this week, this month, that will walk all of us towards the healing. And I give thanks for each of you doing that, listening, that remembering, that moving forward from here, letting go of whatever ways we tell ourselves we've fallen short up until now. Here we are. We get to begin from this place with a smile, with a gesture, with a gift, with an extension of a hand, with a return, with a repair. Thank you each for doing which is yours to do. I'm strengthened by it.
Amen. Amen. And bow. And beauty. And acceptance. Goodbye, beloved community, the sacred sanctuary. May we invoke this refuge ourselves over the next 2 weeks. Amen.
Aho.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Gratitude.
Great to meet you and continue the conversation.
Goodbye for now.
Bye.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Blessings on all.
Yes. Blessings on all.